Hey, hello, you're stuck with Wolf Gorlock. A few minutes riffing on IT and IT security. Today looking at the concept of impedance, what it means for data on web apps, what it means for web application firewalls, and why ultimately, we want our controls as close as possible to the actual application. Now, the world runs on metaphors. We all love them. You know what else the world runs on? Electricity. And in some time, if you were to time box the entire universe between when electricity was invented and when you are watching this video, sometime in there, someone came up with the concept of using electricity and the flow of electrons and the impedance, the concept of what happens between the power and the load, as a metaphor for what happens between an application as the data flows through it. Tip to you: take a look at impedance, particularly impedance mismatch, and what it might mean for web application firewalls and how web application firewalls are bypassed. I've told the story before, right? In the middle of CTF, under the gun, smoke and fire going on. We're saved by web application firewall until someone said, hey, we're being saved by web application firewall. And the bad guys went and clobbered us. And whenever I tell that story, people are like, well, how did they do that, Wolf? Well, let me tell you, there are many ways to bypass web application firewalls. Mostly, the ways are categorized under the concept of getting stuff past the web application firewall such that it looks one way to the WAF and an entirely different way to the application itself. Think, for example, like HTTPS, right? If you're using encrypted HTTPS traffic, some security devices can't read into that. But by the time it gets to the web application firewall, by the time it gets to the web app itself, HTTPS has already been stripped off, and you're okay. This is similar to packet fragmentation tricks that have been used forever and a day to get past firewalls and IPS, IDS. Same exact concept. So if you look at impedance, the concept of impedance is mapping the request to the application front end, to the application middle tiers, to the database, such that at any point in time, the objects being manipulated that eventually reside in your relational database, vis-a-vis SQL Server or what have you, MySQL, that's the same object, right? So an impedance mismatch means that there is a misunderstanding at some layer as to what those objects are. And it's that impedance mismatch that allows you to look absolutely fine by the WAF. By the time it gets to your web app, it's something that injects SQL injection or bad stuff. So how do you get the bad stuff to the web app? Well, several ways. Overloading parameters is a good one. So instead of going user ID equals 1, you go user ID equals 1, user ID equals 2, user ID equals SQL injection string. And the WAF only looks at the first one, and the web app reassembles it and looks at all three. There's fragmentation. So you send the parameters in fragmented ways. Always a pleasure. So the WAF only sees little bits and pieces. The web app puts it all back together because that's the way HTTP works. And of course it gets in. There's also encoding, right? So you encode it, you hide it that way. Double encode it, so the WAF maybe decodes one time but doesn't see the second one. Web app does the decode on the second one, and bam, you're in. So impedance mismatch, ways to bypass a WAF. What can we learn? Put your controls as close as possible to the actual attack. If the WAF is seeing one thing and the web app is seeing another, you want to get it on the web app where the web app is going to be reassembling and exposing this particular type of attack. Again, just like HTTPS or other encrypted traffic, where you want to move that detective control to the endpoint where the packets are all reassembled and it's decrypted, it's nice and pretty. This is why I really am a huge fan of controls like contrast that embed themselves within the application stack and do real-time monitoring, right? There's other ones out there, but for example, that's one I was just looking at. So, in sum, check out data impedance. Pretty dang cool. Check out impedance mismatch. You can bypass WAFs. Who doesn't like to do that? And hit me up in comments on social media with your favorite example of a good WAF bypass. Cheers.